All right. Thanks for coming today, everybody. My name is Dan Duran with Value Scout. I'm here with Mike Lutz. Pretty excited. We're going to be talking about building enterprise value through human capital management. Kind of an underserved topic. We've talked about it a whole bunch. I'm excited to get into it today. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. So first of all, just to key you up to our next session is June 3rd. We'll actually be departing from our usual series here. We'll be running an open demo on our actual Value Scout software platform, walking folks through, sort of what that platform is all about and how we use the Value Scout system to help drive enterprise value with clients. So if you're an advisor and you're sitting here on the call and you haven't been through a demo yet, I would highly encourage you to jump in, see what it's all about, see how we work, and we'll take that from there. The other thing is, as we're going through this today, talking to Mike, I think this is going to be a very sound-biteable. Do you agree with that?
Sure.
We're going to have some sound bites out of this?
Sure.
I think we're going to have a really cool session. So if you're sitting there and you're sitting on LinkedIn, feel free to share something, grab a sound bite, share it out, tag myself, tag Value Scout, tag Mike Lutz. That would be awesome. So with that said, let's dig in. Let's talk a little bit about Mike here. I'll do a quick introduction, and then I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself,
Sure.
Mike. But basically, a career long with one asterisk.
Yeah, that's right.
HR.
Yeah, that's right.
HR guy. Whole bunch of different industries. This ops mindset we're going to talk about a little bit further. We also just finished talking about a bunch of ops stuff at lunch. And background in mid-size and maybe larger companies.
That's right.
Working through really organizational change, I think, is the theme, right?
Yeah, the organizational change, and we'll talk about workforce competitiveness. That's really been the focus.
Okay.
So as you can see on the slide, I've been around for a long time, a lot of different industries. I'll talk a little bit about the third bullet there, the operational mindset. I left HR for a while and ran sales ops for Avaya, telecommunications equipment company. And that was a real eye-opener for me. Before I did that, I was the HR guy who would go into somebody's office and say, here's a 5-page form I need you to fill out. And then when I was on the other side of the desk, the HR person came and said, here's a 5-page form. And I'd say, get out of my office. I'm too busy. I'm not going to fill
Right.
out a 5-page form. Get it down to a page and we'll talk. And so that experience kind of informs the way I think about doing human capital management.
Yeah.
And I left corporate and now doing this full time, helping out companies, mid-sized companies, increase enterprise value through HCM, human capital management.
So before we depart here, I want to talk through 8 different industries. Let's work through those because I think your background is interesting. I come at this from my background. I've worked in a lot of different industries, but I've only worked for companies in three different areas if we're counting Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
So tell me about yours. Where's your worldview informed by?
Yeah. So got my master's, went to Atlantic City, started off in casinos in Atlantic City, and then went to Memphis, where I was in the hotel industry. Then went to Corning, where I was
Up in New York?
Up in New York, upstate New York,
Cold.
a specialty materials company.
Yep.
From there, I went to Coach Leatherwear Fashion. From there, I went to AT&T Telecommunication Services. From there, I went to Lucent Technologies. AT&T spun off Lucent Technologies,
Right.
telecommunication equipment. Lucent spun off Avaya, telecommunication equipment. Then went to Kulik & Soffa, which is microelectronic equipment.
Okay.
Then I went to D&M, which was consumer electronics. Then went to last 8 years with liquidity services, secondary markets for used goods.
So very different industries.
Yeah, very different industries.
We've got gaming, we've got hospitality, we've got technology, we've got telecom,
Right.
Fashion.
Right.
And you've managed to weave through this entire thing
that's right.
a career still focused on the same blocking
that's right.
and
Well, it's important to know how the company makes money because that's starting the discussion. So, what do you do? How do you make revenue? How do you make profit? Those aren't always the same answer, right? And once you get yourself grounded in that on a business, then you start working through the issues. And of course, you've got to take care of the blocking and tackling, the hiring and the benefits and all that. But really where the treasure's buried is what do you have to do with this workforce to make it more competitive?
Yeah.
And what things do you have to move around in order to beat the competition? And that's where the creative work happens.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
The strategic work happens in human resources.
That's great. So let's do this. I want to start with a poll here.
Okay.
So let's, before we get in and turn the corner here, I'm going to launch this poll. Question that we are posing, please, if you're sitting here, join in, throw an answer up there. Which famous CEO paid the head of their HR department or HR group more than the CFO? So let's see where the smart money is. I don't know, like chalk talking this here. I am and I don't know the answer. So okay. I am definitely thinking it's not Jack Welch. I am definitely thinking it's not Steve. So my process of elimination, I'm going to go with Herb.
Yeah.
Don't let the cat out of the bag here yet. Let's see how we go. Right. Looks like we're trending Herb. I hope I didn't influence any answers there, but we'll see. All right. So walk us through this. All right. Answer was Herb. All right. What do we got?
Well, you would be wrong. It's Jack Welch.
No.
Jack Welch.
I'm sorry, I can't swear on these things. Sorry, you really surprised me.
Jack Welch was really clear about this. He said, "I get more value out of HR than I do from finance."
Awesome.
And people will challenge him on that. And he said, "If you think your finance person is more valuable to your business than your HR person, you have the wrong HR person."
Yeah. So that's fascinating. I think generally think of Jack as Neutron Jack, right? He fired 500,000 people or something, ridiculous number.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And yet,
but we're going to get to that in one of the upcoming slides about, if I may, can I?
Yeah, go for it.
So,
here, I got you. How's that?
There we go.
Let's start here.
Let me get through this, and then I'll get to that point you just made because it's an important point. So the purpose of today's talk, we've got a bunch of people on the webinar who, for the most part, the participants in the webinar are people who work with their advisors to CEOs and executive leadership teams. And the purpose is the reason they're there is to help these CEOs and the executive team build enterprise value. And so what I want to do on today's talk is give the people on this call an opportunity to think about human capital management and an approach to human capital management that will help your clients enhance their enterprise value.
Awesome.
Okay. So what is human capital management? HCM is a set of management decisions and actions that increase the competitiveness of the workforce. This is about competitiveness. This is not about kumbaya. So to the point you were making about Neutron Jack, the HCM decision is some of the hardest decisions CEOs have to make.
Right.
So Neutron Jack is a kind of a cliche, but if you're working with mid-sized companies and you've got a CEO who says, like, I need to increase the value of this business by 30%, and they're looking at their head of operations who's been with them for 15 years, and they say, yeah, that person got me to where I am today, but they're probably not going to get me to 30%.
Right.
That's first of all, hard decision. Second of all, a hard discussion to have with the head of operations. Similarly, if you decide that you're going to have to change the sales compensation plan, salespeople hate having their sales comp plan changed. They hate it.
I think most people do.
Yeah. Well, salespeople especially, right? So that means somebody's got to stand up in front of all salespeople and say, you're not going to get paid for that anymore. You're going to get paid for this, and take all the flack that they get from their salespeople. So these are hard decisions. This is people think of HR oftentimes as the kind of the social director. That's not what we're talking about.
The cruise director, right?
Yeah, the cruise director, right? The person who carries the watermelon at the picnics. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about people who have their focus is on how do you create the most competitive workforce that you can have.
Awesome. Yeah, let's get into it. Let's talk through this.
Okay. So one of the first points I want to make is HCM goes second. The first thing that you do as an advisor is you work with the CEO to determine the strategy to realize the enterprise value creation. So if the CEO is saying, look, I need this thing to be worth 30% more than it is today, then you've got some choices to make about how you can make that happen. And once you decide on that, then the second thing you do is you get into, so how are you going to organize the company in order to execute on that plan?
So let's backtrack. Let's spend a couple of minutes talking about strategy.
Okay.
I feel like many times strategy is one of those loosey-goosey words that people throw around, sounds smart, but everybody's got a different viewpoint on it. So I'll offer mine, and you can disagree with me.
All right, go ahead.
I think of strategy as deploying finite resources to accomplish a goal. So we're making decisions and articulating what that end state is, and now we have to figure out how to get there.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
So when we think corporate strategy, and you've said here, advisors work with the CEO to determine the strategy, it sounds to me like what you're saying is somehow the enterprise has already articulated the strategy of where they want to be in the future.
Right.
And where HCM comes in is there's an HCM strategy of building an organization and deploying resources to support the overall enterprise.
Exactly.
Am I off base on this?
No, not at all. So I'm going to go step 2, step 3, step 4 real quickly.
Yeah.
So let me give you an example of what we're talking about. So last company I was at, one of the things that we decided we wanted to do was to really get to the next level of evaluation was put a big push on digital marketing.
Okay.
And hadn't done that before. So major push on digital marketing. So once you make that decision, then you have a whole bunch of HCM decisions you have to make. You have to start with the head of marketing. So is that person the right? Do they have any background in digital marketing? Sure. Some people do, some people don't. If they do, great. If they don't, then you say, okay, well, you're going to train that person up, or are you going to get a new person? Then you got to look down into the organization. You need people who understand social media. You need people who understand SEM, SEO. There's a whole bunch of skill sets that go with digital marketing. You got to build all that capability into the organization. But it doesn't end with marketing, because then you look at IT. You say, well, in order to do digital marketing, you need a whole bunch of IT tools that you may or may not have. You probably don't have if you haven't been focusing on digital marketing.
Right.
So if you're going to put those tools in place, you need the people who can do that. Do you have those people? Yeah, you probably don't. So then there's the follow on with IT. Then there's the follow on with sales. If you're going to be spending more time on or greater emphasis on digital marketing tends to drive inside sales, not field sales.
Right.
So then you look at your sales force and you say, all right, do I have the right mix of inside versus sales? So once you make the decision about this is how we're going to increase the value of the company, there's all these follow-on decisions you have to make about how are you going to organize a workforce in order to make this happen. Yeah.
So I want to go back to, and I apologize in advance. I'm going to make you skip around a little bit. We're going to audible here. So you had started by talking about, we've got an organization that's been running and humming and has gotten to some glide path with its existing workforce. Right. And we have leaders in place that have gotten the organization to this point, but not to the next point.
Right.
So when we're thinking about this and we're designing this organizational structure and capability, what do we do with the folks that are in leadership positions that aren't capable of moving to the next level?
You almost always have to, if there's a place where they can contribute, that's the first question you ask. Is there a place where they can contribute? If they can't be in the job that they're in now, is there another place that they can contribute and that they'd want to, right? Because this is a two-way street. And that's the preferred answer, because no one likes to see people getting thrown overboard. Right. But if the answer is no, then what you have to do is you have to come up with a very humane way, dignified way of exiting that person from
it sounds like you were going to say put out to pasture. Like all of the words that you use kind of sound that way.
Yeah, well, but you have to do it the right way.
Right. So I understand that. But let's go back to, we're going to keep them in the organization. But how do I feel like, let's say that I am the head of sales. And I'm just using that term because it's not really a title, right? Yeah, I am the lead salesperson.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
But now we're going to bring in a new header of sales.
Right.
And my title is going to either change or what have you. But now I'm answering to somebody, and I haven't for the last 15 years.
Right. That's right.
How does that work?
Well, it's got to be mutual. The former head of sales has to be okay with the change.
Yeah.
And if he or she is, then fine. And sometimes you'll find that for personal reasons, whatever, they want to throttle back. They don't want the pressure of being the head of sales. I'll tell you, in my experience, it doesn't happen very often.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Let's handicap the numbers. How often does?
Yeah, 1 out of 10.
Yeah.
And then what happens is you have to manage the situation so that they can leave gracefully and find their next opportunity. I'm a big believer in supporting people's success. sometimes that means they have to go someplace else.
Right.
Right. They're going to be successful someplace else, not here.
Got it. All right. So I just want to come back to your slides here. We have worked with the CEO, worked with the enterprise to connect the dots between organizational strategy and HCM strategy. We're looking at the present state of the organization, right, and looking at a future state or to be state, or however we want to say that, and conducting a gap analysis. Right. And then we're going to fill in some holes. Right. Is that kind of how you see this unfolding?
Yeah, that's exactly how it unfolds.
Awesome.
All right, pushing along.
Let's do it.
So
hey, and before we jump in, just for folks here, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box here. Happy to try to answer on the fly. You good with that?
Yeah.
So if anybody has something, drop it in. I will do my best to moderate as we're working along here. But let's jump back into this.
Good. So one of the first reactions that people get when they hear this is they say, "Boy, it sounds complicated."
Yeah.
There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of variables. How do I organize my thinking about this? So what I'm offering here is an easy way of remembering how to approach this issue. So you are looking for the right people in the right jobs doing the right things. So for the advisors on the webinar, if you memorize that phrase, that we need the right people in the right jobs doing the right things, it'll give you a way to structure your discussions with the CEO and with the executive team. So let's dig into that a little bit.
Okay. Yep, there you go. I got to give you control back. Sorry. Technical difficulties.
Okay, here we go.
There you go.
So right people in the right jobs. So where do you start when you think about the right people? You start with senior leadership. Why do you start with senior leadership? Because that's where the leverage is. The senior leaders are the people who drive the organization. If you have a good senior leader, then you're in great shape. If your senior leader is weak or in the wrong job, then you're swimming upstream.
So let's talk about that word leverage, though. Like I talk financial leverage. You're talking a different kind of leverage. What do you mean by the leverages with senior leaders?
All right. So I'll kind of stay with my digital marketing examples just to keep it easy. So if you've got a leader who really understands digital marketing and is expert in it and knows how to attract the right talent and direct that talent to do what they need to do in order to execute the plan, then you get huge leverage out of that senior leader. But if you have a newbie, somebody who's never been around digital marketing before, and you say, okay, you're now, you need to lead the charge on digital marketing, that person is going to be learning on the job, and normally that's going to be a high risk situation, right? That person is going to be really climbing the ladder while you're trying to actually get this thing to go.
Right.
It's very hard.
So there are situations where we don't want to develop. We want to sort of fast forward, fast track.
Yeah. So one of the rules of thumb that I have is okay. One of the rules of thumb I have for putting people in jobs is you can generally describe a job as having three areas of a challenge, right? There's three things that you need to be able to do. And you can, any job you look at, you can kind of figure out, okay, these are the three big pieces of the job. You can stretch person one way. You can't stretch person two way. They've got to have at least two out of the three already mastered in order for them to go into that job. If you're going to ask them to master two new things, they're going to fail.
All right. So your head of digital marketing, they have to be capable, like pre-qualified in at least two of the three things.
That's right.
And when we say the three things, it's like, if we can't do these three things, we cannot be successful in this role.
That's right.
All right. So one can be a stretch. Two have to be gimmies.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay.
Other than that, it's just the risk is too high.
So cool. So let's pause here. I want to do this other poll here. Question that we're posing, and it kind of relates to this like right person discussion, right? So the question is, what's the average failure rate for an outside executive hire?
Right.
So folks, jump in there. Let's see what we think here.
Okay.
All right. Alan, what do you think it is? Our options are 30, 40, 50, or 60%.
Executive hires. These are executive hires.
Alan's over here squinting like he's the old guy with glasses.
Alan's not really sure. This is interesting. It's
when in doubt, pick C.
So Alan says, when in doubt, pick C. That's a good answer. We are like a dead heat. Everybody is not picking 30%. So let's close this up. Let's see what we got here. Mike, what's our answer?
The rule of thumb is 50.
Okay.
Although the people who said 60 aren't wrong. I've seen some studies that say 60%, which is when you think about it,
nice job, Alan.
that's a huge risk.
Yeah.
Right. It's a coin flip whether the person is going to be successful or not. But let me just make one more point. That the reason it's that high is because so many companies do such a bad job hiring. It doesn't have to be that high. It is that high because people screw it up.
Interesting. All right. So I want to talk about this. So clients that I tend to work with are usually working towards a goal of a transaction, an exit, or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
We're on the clock, right? Like there's a timeline that we're working towards.
Yep.
So let's think through this. If we have an executive hire, how long is it going to take to go from ideation, I need a new head of digital marketing, to putting a button seat? What do you think that normally on average is?
There's a lot of variability around it. So let's say 4 months.
Okay. Third of the year, right? How long before we are likely to know that they're not the right fit?
That's 3 months.
All right. So we are well into a half a year, which means that, and then there's probably a little bit of time to like waffle around and make a decision.
Yeah.
And then we have to go through the cycle again. It's a serial process.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
So we're well into the beginning of year 2,
right,
before we can unwind this decision.
Yeah, that's right. And in the meantime, you've had all the lost productivity and the cost of doing the search, and it's a big problem. So
let's unpack this. If we are trying to deploy resources with leverage, high leverage human capital resources, and there is an actual hard cost to doing this acquisition, this talent acquisition, and a high failure rate, and it's going to take us time. Let's say we've got a 3 to 5 year exit window, and it's going to take us a year and a quarter, year and a half to get through this process, to get it right. We've just burned down a material portion of our exit window,
right,
when that high leverage asset should have been performing and driving organizational performance.
Right. So the conclusion is,
don't f it up. Again, there's another bleep for you, Alan. Sorry.
That's right. Do a really good job of hiring. I can't tell you how many times I've walked out of an interview when I've because I've been in 8 different industries, so I've done some interviewing in my time. I've walked out of an interview and said that was terrible. that person had no idea how to interview me.
Yeah.
And yet they are senior people who are doing these interviews, and they're making decisions based on terrible information because they don't know how to do selection. Not only do they not know how to interview, but things like background checks they don't do. I have found problems on background checks where an executive will say, this is my background, and you do the background check. You say, oh no, he's not. That's not who that
totally
person is.
Yeah,
that's not who that person is. Reference checks are actually, if you do a good job on reference checks, you're not just talking to the references that the person gives you, you're finding other people who they haven't given you, who have worked with them in the past, and you're calling them up.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And boy, you learn a lot from that.
I bet. Yeah, nobody's ever ambushed me. I don't know how I would react to that.
Yeah, well,
probably hang up. Who's this? Who's this guy?
Well, I'll tell you, I've had people who are great candidates react really, really well to it. I have people who have bad candidates react really badly to it.
I bet. Yeah, I bet. Yeah. So this is one of the conversations that we've had previously, for a smaller organization that's sort of transitioning to a larger organization. The HR function is often tactical in nature.
That's right.
Right? Like it is focused on administrative tasks and payroll and benefits.
Yep.
It is not necessarily geared towards strategy.
Yeah, that's right.
So here we are, we're trying to design this organization to scale. How do we build in this capability to acquire talent and interview? And
you rent it.
Okay.
You don't buy it, you rent it.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's more expensive.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any sense to have the high cost human asset sitting on the payroll.
Right.
But
meaning the HR asset.
Yeah, that's right.
So
right?
you have a specialist problem. We rent the specialist asset to get us across this bridge.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna keep beating up.
Go ahead.
So when you say you rent it, are we talking like a retained search, or are we talking somebody like on the inside of HR that is working through this process with the organization?
Inside.
How do we look at these things?
Inside. So I'll need to make a very clear
Like
distinction.
somebody just asked that same question.
There
Does
it
renting
is.
a specialist
Yeah.
mean using headhunters?
No, it doesn't. All
Okay.
right, I want to be absolutely clear about it.
We'll come back to the first question in a second.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
What an outside recruiter will do is source a candidate.
Yep.
That's just the first step in the process.
Sure.
And they won't have any accountability for a bad hire.
So they're building inventory for you.
Yeah, well, they are the ones who are saying, well, what about this person? Well, what about this person? And so when you finally hire somebody, they go, good, and their job's done.
Right.
They do not take any accountability for the quality of the hire. All they're doing is trying to match a job spec that you've given them with candidates they can find.
Yep.
And if you make a bad hire, that's on you.
Right.
They walk away and say, oh, I did my job.
So if I hear you correctly, what we're saying is it doesn't mean that we should not use outside search.
Yeah, that's right, for sourcing, but just know what they do.
But that's just talent that's building inventory. That is not actually working the process
They
to
source candidates. They do not
make
take
good
any
decisions.
accountability for good decisions on the hire.
So you having, a career of experience, like working through these processes.
Yeah.
How do you start to look at this? You parachute into an organization. What are the capabilities that you either need to provide or you need to build in the organization to be able to increase the likelihood of success on this hire?
Well, it's process work. So the very first thing you do is you look at the process.
Okay.
So do you have a good interview process? And there's better and worse interview processes. So you inspect the process. You inspect whether people have been trained in interviewing. Lots and lots of people have never been trained in interviewing.
Yeah.
They've been told to interview somebody, but they go, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
But they wing it. Right.
Yeah,
and
sure.
so, they do a terrible interview. There's background check processes that you need to have in place. There's reference check processes you need to have in place. It's really a process kind of a thing that you need to manage from the inside.
All right. So where does the gut check come in? Because I feel like there's always this element of like, all right, so I went through all that. Like, do I ever get to make a gut check decision here?
Yeah. So yes, it's unavoidable because we're talking about humans, right?
Yeah.
The candidates are human and the deciders are human. So you're never going to get past the gut check. But what I'd say is that some of the worst decisions, the reason the thing is 50% is because most people just rely on their gut.
Yeah.
And
not go through the process because they just skip to the.
Yeah.
And really what we want to do is use the process. And then our last step is the gut check is between A, B, and C.
Yeah. So the people who don't know how to interview, what they end up doing is they're screening for, do I like this person?
Yeah.
Is this a person I actually want to work with every day?
Sure.
Which is, interesting and somewhat important. But you can hire somebody who's completely incompetent.
Yep.
That you like working with every day,
right.
until you figure out that they can't deliver what you need to deliver.
So let's go back to this question that's posed up here. So what is the best advice you could give a client on how to best hire a senior person, department head or higher?
Yeah, so it's a longer discussion, and whoever the anonymous attendee is, I'm happy to have a longer discussion with.
We'll flip your contact information out at the end of this.
It's a longer discussion, but it's as I said, it's a process, and the first step in the process is being really clear on the job spec. What do you need in that person?
Yep.
And be able to articulate the kind of things that you're looking for in a candidate that's going to be an indicator of success.
Right.
And there's it's, as I said, it's kind of an involved process. It's very doable. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to follow it, but you need to have a pretty well defined, pretty well structured step 1, step 2, step 3 in order to work through that.
So let me leverage off of this question here. At lunch, we were talking about growing organizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're in a growing organization, do we think that we should be hiring for the need now or the future state of the organization?
Yeah. So both.
Yes.
It's not an or, it's an and. So whoever you hire, today's job's got to get done. Now, you're not going to hire for somebody who can do it in 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So a realistic time frame is 2 or 3 years. If you can see forward to 2 or 3 years. But after 2 or 3 years, everyone's just guessing.
Sure. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So one more question. We'll move on here. So Sarah asks, how do you know when it's time to get a more experienced or robust HR function? based on head counts? What are the triggers that need to happen? What is the telegraph? How are we telegraphing that it's time to do this?
Yeah, great question, Sarah. I'd say that when you have more questions than answers, when you start looking at an organization and say, so do I have the right people in the operations group? How do I, I've got squabbles going on between sales and marketing. How do I sort all that out? And if it starts to feel like you're falling further and further behind on the HR stuff, it's time to go out and rent somebody who can help you ask the right questions and get to the right answers.
Is there also a trigger on seniority? So like if we go back to this, this other question about hiring department heads, if all we're hiring is widget makers, line level employees, or however we want to say this, do things change when we need to make higher leverage hires?
Yeah, say more about. I'm not sure I'm following the question.
So I mean, we've kind of been dancing around this. Like, we need to start with senior leadership.
Yep.
Senior leadership is hard to hire on the outside. It has a high failure rate. We need to build process.
Yep.
So is one of the triggers for getting a more experienced and more robust HR function the organization growing to the point where we're building in that middle management layer?
Yeah. Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, the larger the company is, the more complex the company is, and really, it's a function of complexity. If like, my brother has a business, he's got 3 employees. He doesn't need an HR person. Yeah. Right, because there's just not a lot of complexity with 3 employees. Right. Yeah. And
the M in management would be a little underserved in that in that situation.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so there's this complexity curve. Sure. And then as you come up the complexity curve, you finally hit the point where you're saying, this is, I'm getting problems I don't know the answer to. Yeah. Like my brother doesn't have that. Yep. That, every now and then he'll call me and say, what do I do about this? But yeah, it's a very very small business, but I think this is one of those areas where you kind of trust your gut. Yeah, where you say, like, this feels like it's like out of control, and I'm running into problems. I need a solution.
So you said something interesting earlier as well, talking about product cycles and how that creates organizational complexity. Let's talk about that for a second. Yeah. I keep hijacking here. I know we want to get through the rest of this, but I think this is fantastic.
Yeah. So we were having lunch, and I have this theory about product development cycle driving culture. Yeah. And I posited two different kinds of businesses. So insurance companies at the one end, insurance companies, very, very slow product development cycles. Right. People don't think about insurance companies as, putting out a new product every 6 months. And on the other end of the spectrum is software companies. Right? Sure. You can have a release every week in a software company. And so when you think about working in those two businesses, it's a very, very different level of urgency, right? And you need different kind of talent to deal with that urgency. And so as you're thinking about how do you deal with building a more competitive workforce, you've got to keep that variable in mind. It matters a lot.
So more agile, rapid release, product cycle type companies, more urgent the need to
you need people who know how to run fast. You just need people to run fast. I hear you. If you have people running fast in an insurance company, they're gonna
hit a wall. Like where are they going, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
All right, let's move ahead here again. I'll get you back on track.
Okay. So we talked about senior leadership having the high leverage. So the obvious follow-on question is, so how do you know if you've got the right senior leaders? So treat it, and these are people who are currently in place. Yep. Treat it like an interview. Now you have to be careful. You can't be insulting with people where you're telling them that they're interviewing for their own job. Because people react very badly to that, and there's no reason to insult people. Right. But you look at their CV, you talk to them about, what have you been doing for the last 10 years, and tell me about some of your successes, and tell me about some of the things that didn't go so well. Would you learn from all the things that you do in an interview? I'm also a big believer in 360 degree. Yeah. So when you're talking to all the senior leaders, you say, well, what about Sally? How's Sally doing over there? And you're above board with everybody. If you start to, kind of go around people's back and ask those questions, it builds distrust. Don't do it. just make sure everybody understands that, that you're doing an assessment in order to make sure that we have the right people in place in order to execute the strategy.
Right
on. And I also am a big believer in including customers in that. If you have a person who is customer facing, customers will give you good information. They will, because they care, right? Because this company is the provider to the vendor, whatever, and they care, and they have an informed point of view.
Absolutely.
And there's also I list assessment tools there. There's a dozen, couple dozen assessment tools you could use.
Got it. Okay. All right. So let's. Where are we going from here? Right people. I got you.
Okay. Here we go. We already did this.
Yeah, we already did that. Let's go.
In the right jobs.
All right, let's. We're gonna pause real quick. Last poll of the day.
Okay.
All right. So, question we want to pose to everyone: what do we think the generally accepted optimal span of control is? And that means the number of direct reports that an individual has.
Hardline direct reports.
Right. That's an interesting disclaimer right there. Hard line, direct line, direct reports.
Line, not dotted line.
So, looks like most people are going to go with 7.
8's trying to catch up there.
But nobody thinks 9 or 10.
No, 9 or 10 is too much.
9 or 10 is too much. All right, let's see where we go. We'll be quick on this one. So, survey overwhelmingly was 7, and Mike says good enough.
I'm the number I carry around in my head is 8.
Okay.
But 7's fine. You and I were talking earlier. The military is between 6 and 8, so 7 or 8 is a good number. When you start getting above that, you run into some issues. So I had in the last job, one of our business units had a sales organization where it was 1 to 20.
Yeah,
and
it's a lot of direct reports.
There's a lot of direct reports, and so I lobbied hard for you need more supervisors. And the head of the business department said the business was saying I can't afford the cost.
How do you feel about a player coach? So in that sales model, you've got 20 sales folks.
Yeah, sure.
Can I be a team leader that is also a worker bee?
Yeah, but you can't compete with your people, right? You can't if
interesting.
If you're
especially in the sales world, right?
That's right. If you're selling and the people that work for you are also selling, they can't feel as though they're competing with their boss.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So optimizing the organizational design.
Yeah. So just a couple thoughts here. Bulk up on the high leverage functions, slim down on low leverage functions. So I'll go back to my example. So if you're going to get into digital marketing, then obviously you're going to have to spend more money on marketing, right? So you're going to bring people into the marketing function. But then unless the business is like okay with just piling cost on, you got to look around and say, okay, well, if I'm going to be leveraging up here, if I'm going to be adding more cost into marketing, we're going to take cost out.
Yeah.
And so you got to be really disciplined about. So maybe if I am going to be selling more through inside sales and less through field sales, maybe that's the opportunity to take some cost out of sales.
Well, and if we're looking at our marketing budget and we have identified that we have an initiative, and we keep saying digital marketing, our budget allocation decision should be like highest and best use, right? Where am I getting the most bang for my buck?
Right.
So it kind of comes back to high leverage, high specialization,
and
level
again,
of experience.
All in service of the strategy, of the business strategy, right? You don't make the stuff up in a vacuum. It's all in the context of the business strategy.
Yep.
A couple other thoughts. One is we already talked about span of control. So that second bullet talks about there are times when two different organizations are having trouble. There's some friction between the two.
Sales and marketing.
Sales and marketing, right?
Yep.
Sales and marketing, like peanut butter and jelly. Sometimes you see them butting heads. And one solution to that is just put it under a single leader.
Yeah.
I'll let that single leader deal with the friction. And generally speaking, that's if you have the right senior leader, that's a good solution.
Got it.
Put your best talent on your biggest opportunity. So this doesn't work all the time, but you should always ask the question. So when you're the advisor, you're talking to the CEO, you're talking to the senior leaders, you say, who are your best people by name?
Mm-hmm.
So give me the names of the 6 best people that you have in the organization. And they'll give you the names because they know who they are. And then you say, okay, well, can you give them more to do? Can you bulk up their responsibilities? Because if these are your fastest horses, bet on your fastest horses. And if they say, well, they're already pretty busy, well, can you if there's something that they're busy on that's not core to the strategy, can you take that away?
So let's talk like Elon Musk.
Yeah.
So you got a guy that is running a series of public companies.
Yes, he is.
And while they were trying to spin up their Model 3, he's sleeping on the factory floor working on robots.
Yeah.
And arguably because he's the best mechanical engineer in that company.
Yeah.
So you're laughing though.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this.
Okay, go ahead.
So let's figure this out. So you've got the CEO of a company who's sleeping on the factory floor because someone thinks, maybe Elon,
maybe
thinks he's the best one to do it. So is there a logical end to this where it doesn't make sense?
That's
to
a
do
crisis
this?
situation. So in a crisis situation, because when he was sleeping on the floor, he was in trouble.
Yeah.
Right? He was in big trouble.
Yeah, they're about to like put the padlock on the door, like cartoon
right.
style.
And so he, and he did the right thing as a leader, right?
Yeah.
You lead from the front, right?
Yep.
So he went and put in all the hours. Good for him. That's not a long-term solution. That's not sustainable,
No.
right? So yeah, there's certainly times when you have to burn on the candle at both ends. But what you really want to do, and I'm hoping what Elon did, is he was also looking back into his organization and say, okay, who here can help me out? Because at the same time, his manufacturing, his head of manufacturing left the company at the same time, right?
Yep.
So he needed to find some talent to help run that manufacturing, and I guess he did, right? Because Tesla
seems to be doing okay right now. So
right. They got that one turned around.
So let's go one more question here. I got to scroll down for you. What's the best way to tee up this type of human organizational change to a business to get the best adoption? So we're really talking about a resistance here.
So I'd ground it. It's a great question because you see it all the time. And if you have this discussion with leaders that sounds like it's disconnected from the business, from the strategy, and it sounds like you're just trying to do the touchy-feely change management stuff, they're going to stiff arm you, and they should because that's not why you're there. You're there to execute the strategy. But to the extent that you can link it to the strategy, so I'll go back to one of my other examples where we had a business unit that had a 20-to-1 reporting relationship, and said we need to add more cost in here. We need to get this ratio down to something more reasonable, and we had that long discussion. And the person was finally convinced. The leader was finally convinced. Yes, we have to do this in order to execute on the strategy, and it worked. The sales went up by multiples.
So in this question, the person questions that like the resistance. Like I'm the manager with 20 direct reports, and you're telling me I should have 8.
Yeah.
Why am I losing 12? It feels like you're taking something away from me, right? Like I'm getting a demotion. How do we manage through that?
Yeah. So one of the things that one of the discussions that we had with those two people was, and one of them was close to retirement. Said we need to build some bench strength. And the other one was not that close to retirement, but he also knew that he's not immortal. Right? People get hit by buses and other things happen, and you can't put the business at risk. Right?
Yep.
If we weren't able to create that expanded capability, hire more people, there was a risk to that business. We had single points of failure.
What happens when you get this resistance and the answer is like it or lump it? Like this is too many direct reports. We are going to make it 8.
Yeah,
get on the bus or get off. Like
that's the CEO's job. Yeah. All right. That's where the CEO. I mean, that's why you have to get this in order to make a lot of this stuff work.
Right.
You can't work against a CEO. You got to sell the CEO on these.
And none of this is going to happen without a champion in the organization, whether it's the CEO or division head or whatever it is. We need leadership support to make these harder decisions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, that's the role of leadership.
Right. So one more question, we'll move ahead here. Question is, people often talk about the strength of an organization's culture.
Yeah.
How do you manage culture for competitive advantage?
Yeah, great.
It's a cool question, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. Culture is about enforced expectations. That's what culture is. So you're ex-military, right?
Yes, that's true.
And the military has one of the strongest organizational cultures in the world.
Yeah.
And it comes out of enforced expectations. You will make your bed. you will polish your shoes. You will salute that officer. And if people don't do it, there's a consequence, right? There's a significant consequence when people don't follow the expectations that are enforced. That's what culture is, and so if you want to improve the competitiveness of the culture, you have to get back to what are the expectations that you're articulating, and are you enforcing them? And it's actually a two-part problem. You have to be clear about what expectations you're creating, and you also have to be clear about whether those are being enforced.
So this is interesting. The enforcement piece, right?
Yeah.
Go back to the military. If I don't make my bed, what are the repercussions, right? I'm doing push-ups, I'm peeling potatoes, some bad thing happens.
Yeah, that's right.
If Alan doesn't make his marketing bed, then he's not peeling potatoes, right? So the repercussions are different in everywhere else in corporate world versus military, where we can make Alan do push-ups in military.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's actually saying that we can make him do push-ups now. So we'll talk about this a little bit more later. But how do we get to that enforcement thing and create that self-reinforcing culture that thrives?
Yeah.
Right?
So there's a continuum of that, right?
Yeah.
So you can do it very gently. You can when somebody is straying from the expectations, you can have the discussion about, look, let's review. This is the things I need you to do.
Yep.
I love it when you do this. I'm not happy when you do that. And so do less of that and do more of this, right? And so you can have those kind of gentle discussions. But if you've got somebody who's habitually a problem, it gets tougher and tougher, and finally that person can't stick around.
Yeah. So one of the other things that strikes me, if I think back to military days, celebrate your successes.
Mm-hmm.
And the retrospective on failures,
right?
The postmortem.
Yep.
Military, we call it after action review, but we are dissecting what happened.
Yep.
Celebrate your victories.
Yep.
Work through the defeats.
Right.
Is there an element of that here?
Yeah, sure. And actually that's I'm going to push it because that ends up being you got to give me it back.
Yep.
That ends up being in the doing the right things. You're talking about employee motivation and performance here. Here, I'll just click through these. This is performance management. So you just checked on performance management. There's got to be some process in place where you have an opportunity to speak to somebody about what they're doing.
Right.
Now, for medium-sized companies, you can't afford a lot of process overhead. So going back to my story before about the 5-page form I asked people to fill out, you can't do that in medium-sized companies. But you have to have something in place where you're referencing the strategy, you're referencing people's role in the strategy, and you're saying, okay, so here's what you're doing to support the strategy. I love it when you do this. I don't love it when you do that. I need you to do less of that and more of this. You've got to have that loop. Don't build a lot of process around that. Have minimal process around that, but make sure it's happening.
How important do you think it is that people understand their role in organizational success or big picture strategy?
Yeah, I think it's really important. For the New England Patriots fans out there, Bill Belichick is like, know your job, do your job.
Yep. There's an F in the middle of that.
But. Yeah, that's right. Know your job, do your job, and I think that's important for everybody. That people need to be connected from, this is what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis in the company, and this is where we're trying to get to, and that's a leadership role.
Yeah.
Leaders have to connect those dots for people, and it's not a once and done thing. They have to continue to repeat that so people get it.
Cool.
I also want to call it compensation here on doing the right thing. So I'm a big fan of variable pay. I mean, you got to pay people a base pay, but I mentioned bonus there because it's a really hard thing for a CEO to stand up in front of people and say, I need you to all work real hard so I can get rich. Right? There's got to be something in it for the people who are doing it, and they need to see a financial reward. as they're getting closer and closer to the final goal of whatever the value enhancement is.
Yep.
I also call out sales compensation. Sales compensation is a very specialized area of compensation.
That is like an entirely different session, right?
Yeah, it's a very specialized area. There's dozens of ways to do it. There's dozens of ways to do it right.
And hundreds of ways to do it wrong.
Yeah, that's right. And you just have to remember that salespeople are coin operated. And they will do what you pay them to do, and they will not do what you don't pay them to do. And you got to be really clear about what you're paying them to do, and does that align with the strategy of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Shall we move ahead here? Anything else on this?
So where are we now?
Hey, customer feedback. Let's backtrack to that one. I'll get you there.
Customer feedback.
I think that I find this interesting. We're sitting here in a human capital management discussion. And your bullet point here is get feedback from customers.
Oh yeah, customers.
How does that fit into the HR HCM world?
So okay, let's go back. This is all about building the most competitive workforce. That's the reason you do this.
Yep.
And so again, you don't do that in a vacuum. The competitiveness is within the context of how well are you serving your customers, your market, right?
Right.
And the best way to find that out is to talk to your customers. And I'm not talking about surveys. I'm talking about having a live discussion with a customer. Now, of course, you can't do this all. You can't abuse that, right? Because customers are busy people too. But if you have the right introduction into the right person of the customer, and say, look, here's the strategy that we're working on. We want to be able to serve you better. Do you have 15 minutes to talk to me about this?
Yep.
And customers will generally do that.
So let's look at an example, because now I'm like thinking the tactics of this, right? Let's say we have an organization that has a bunch of field reps that are out, at customer sites.
Yeah.
How do we go about this process of okay, there's 400 customers.
Yeah.
Who makes that introduction? Who makes the phone call? Who does the interview? How does that all unfold?
Yeah.
And I know that's probably an entirely another session.
Yeah, it may be. So you probably aren't going to talk to 400 customers.
Of course.
Right. And there, I can imagine there's plenty of scenarios where the customer base is just too scattered.
Sure.
And you can't get a good read on either a person or an organization by just talking to a couple different customers. But if your client is in a market where there's 3 or 4 really important customers, in my experience, that's true.
Right.
Most companies I've been with, there's 3 or 4 customers that are really important.
Sure.
Or maybe a dozen, right? But there usually isn't 400.
Right.
And so you focus on that. Those few customers really matter.
Got it. Okay. Cool. I will not continue to belabor this, even though I want to. Next up.
All right. So I'm not going to read through all this. I offer this again. This is a way for the people on the call to think about, as you are working with your clients, as you are thinking through a human capital management strategy with your clients, how do you think about this? How do you approach this? And so what I've listed here is a whole bunch of questions. I've grouped them into right people, right jobs, doing the right things. This is not an exhaustive list, but I offer this as a help tool for the people on the call as you're thinking about engaging with your clients. These are the kind of questions that you start with. Now, of course, there's a whole bunch of follow-on questions as you're getting the answers, and you have to ask the second and third question to really peel back the onion. But these are the kind of things that you ought to be getting after in order to start formulating the right human capital management.
Awesome. Yep.
Okay.
So I think this brings us to the end. If anybody's got questions, you want to pop them in, feel free to do that. And Mike, we can move on to the end here and start to wrap this thing up.
Okay.
Figure out our next steps.
Give it back to me.
Yep.
Okay. Just 3 main points that I made before. I come to this with a very strong opinion that if you're going to do a significant uplift in value enhancement for your client, you're going to have to get into HCM. You can't avoid it. Number 1. Number 2 is it's not standalone. HCM always happens in the context of the larger value creation strategy. And then just to repeat, right jobs, right people in the right jobs doing the right things. Just if you can internalize that, that gives you a way of thinking about how to have the right conversation with your client.
Yeah. So, and I want to start to connect some dots here. Like we've gone through this content arc over the last couple of months that you've been part of, Sarah Hardery's been part of, Sean has been part of, and we're about to talk sales next 2 weeks from now,
Okay.
2 sessions from now. We've talked sales, we've talked marketing, we've talked human capital, we've talked operations, and really what we're doing is building out this arc, this concept that this is a team sport. We are aligning on this idea of value creation.
Yep.
But really, I think what you have said here just kind of like highlights this for me, that you can't do this without the right people.
That's right.
And we can't deploy the right people without the ops oversight and infrastructure and process and all of that great goodness that goes into driving performance. And obviously we need the sales and marketing engine in order to create the growth that feeds this entire beast.
Yep.
This is like a living organism that we are building here towards one common goal, which is shareholder returns, really.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Very cool stuff. Are we wrapped up here? Did you have?
Yeah. So my last slide is, and this is just my pitch. So for those of you on the call, if you find yourself in a project where there is a human capital management component that you're struggling with, reach out to me. I'm happy to have the first, what Sarah calls discovery call. So the meter doesn't run on the first call. So give me a call. Explain to me what you're up against. I'll do whatever I can to help you. And if it looks like it's a big lift, then we'll have the next discussion about how to help out.
Very cool. So Mike's contact information here down the bottom of the page. Hit him up on LinkedIn. We'll publish this over the next couple of days. This is a question we always get back, like when are we going to publish the video of this? Yeah. It'll be, Alan, early next week or tomorrow? Tomorrow. Survey says. Now you're on the clock. We got to make sure it happens. Other talking points, just a couple of things. So next events, just go back and check. getvaluescout.com/events is our event calendar. Our next event coming up is on June 3rd. That's going to be me running an open demo on our software platform. That'll also be in our newsletter tomorrow. Is that right, Alan? So you'll be able to click through in Friday afternoon newsletter to hit that. Am I forgetting anything, gentlemen? Mostly Alan. All right. Well, great. So thanks everybody for coming today. Mike, this has been an absolute pleasure. I will flip to the last slide because that is the one thing that Alan is telling me that I'm supposed to do. Again, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it. We'll catch you over the next couple of weeks.